I almost forgot.
Hey, folks, welcome to the Generational Gap. I'm Robert, your resident Gen Xer. Right up there, I think right up there is our resident millennial, John. John, how are you doing tonight?
Fantastic as always. Pumped. Can't wait.
We
It's
don't
gonna
get
be
any.
fun.
We don't get any head points. What? What? That's like your signature
Excited.
move. There you go.
This right here, excited. It's
Yeah.
my excited
So,
face.
we've got a show tonight, folks. You'll notice that there's a couple of additions in the show box tonight. We've got to my top. He's topping me tonight, which I'm not going to say I'm averse to. We've got Nate Slattery in the house. Nate, how are you doing tonight? Good to see you.
A little creeped out now.
As well you should be, my friend. As well you should be. And right over there to my other side is Stephen Ignoramus. How are you doing tonight, Mister Ignoramus?
Good. I'm doing awesome, sir.
Good, good, good. So
Very
these,
formal.
right, right. It's all formal.
I'm not a
So
crook.
these gentlemen are here tonight because we have. I love it when people show up to tell us they're not going to be here.
Yeah, that's always the best.
That's my
Robert, the
favorite.
power about him. Oh, make sure and get that power about him in there. But anyway, so tonight's the night, folks. Tonight's the night. Some folks have been waiting with bated breath, and it smells like shit. But I'm just saying, tonight's the night for the debate. We've got Stephen Ignoramus in the house to moderate the debate between myself and Nate, and John is up there to. Well, he's
I'm
our
gonna
color. He's going to be our color man.
Yeah.
He's our color man tonight.
Yeah, tonight I'll be drinking beer
He's
for
the
the stream.
drunken minority.
So that's right.
We've got a rousing debate tonight. Stephen, I don't have it pulled up right here. Do you have the premise for the debate, please? Can you go ahead and tell us what's our debate about tonight?
All right. So our debate is about definitions and dictionaries. The resolution is that Webster's unabridged English Dictionary of 1913 is more accurate and helpful in political discussions and disagreements than Webster's Dictionary of 2019. Nathaniel is the pro and Robert is the con. And
Wow.
I have the 1913 paper dictionary here, the 2019 paper dictionary, and online sources for both of them. So I'll be looking some stuff up.
Now that is what I call a debate moderator. Let's give it up for Stephen Ignoramus doing the work, doing the work. There it is, folks. He's the man with the plan. Midget B in the house. How you doing tonight, Midget B? Good to see you. Good to see you. Swinging that big wrench around.
Right. He's correcting you. It is not color man. It is man of color. Thank you.
No, in baseball, he was the color man. Don't you remember that? Do you not know that?
No.
Oh,
No, I wasn't around back
so
then
they
like
had
you were.
they had the announcer and they had the color man. The color man was the guy who fed you all the facts about the athletes as they came up to the plate, because you couldn't expect the announcer to know all that data. So you had one guy sitting to the side and he'd be like, "Okay, so and so's coming up to the plate," and he's like, and then he would kick in and he'd be like, "Oh, and so has this RBI and this, that, and the other thing." It was one of those things. He was the color man.
Gotcha.
He added color
Gotcha.
to the conversation, as it
Do you
were.
know what? Do you know what the straight
That is
man
old
means
speak.
in comedy?
Say again?
Is the straight man in comedy?
Yes.
I use that term a lot.
I bet you
know,
do.
the guy who receives all the jokes. So it's a great term for shit. Anyways, I just wanted to say that. Is
Um,
Fair
Robert?
enough.
No one's told me.
What?
He's got kids. I thought he was married.
Who?
Who?
Are you gay,
Who?
Robert?
Only in
No.
action.
No.
Oh, okay, just
No, at
No,
least
he's not.
my wife
you gotta
doesn't
be
think
careful
so.
with these atheists.
Yo, Nathaniel, is there a way you can turn your mic up just a little bit?
Possibly. I don't know.
Anyway, sorry.
So
Or you just start yelling. Either way.
Yo!
John,
Hey, sing along bear. What's up? So I'll be the one talking in the chat. I'll be the chat liaison
Okay,
tonight.
cool.
is that what you're going to be?
Yeah.
So, how's your week been, John? I've got to take a moment to catch up. How's your week been? Anything crazy going on in your week? No, nothing. Boring.
Nope.
Okay, typical.
As usual.
Hey, there's something I wanted to point out. And look, before I say this, and I'm saying this to the general group here, I don't want to get into some long discussion about this. I don't want to get into viewpoints, this, that, and the other. But I've had an "I told you so" moment, and I need to point it out to John.
Oh, okay.
John, I said something to you whenever Brett Kavanaugh was coming onto the Supreme Court in the direction of this something potentially happening with Roe versus Wade. And in the discussion, you pointed out to me they're not just going to jump in and revisit Roe versus Wade for no fucking reason, right? Which is a good point, right? But I did warn that the impetus is there for someone to reopen Roe versus Wade through action. And now we have that actually happening these last couple of weeks with the Georgia and the Alabama abortion laws that have gone into place. Specifically, the Alabama, they're saying it is more than likely going to bring the Supreme Court into the question to make a decision about this. So this is what I was talking about. There would be plays made to try and get this decision looked at, potentially overturned by a Republican-leaning Supreme Court. Whatever happened, if that's my conspiracy theory. I'm sticking with it. I think this is what was expected to happen, and it's happening.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen though is they're just going to apply Roe versus Wade and say as long as they're not making it illegal, then we can't touch it.
Well, virtually, Alabama has made it a felony offense.
Virtually
is
different. Virtually is different.
They didn't leave any out clauses, really. They didn't leave any real out clauses. That's why they're saying that it's possible that the Supreme Court is going to have to get involved and make a ruling on whether or not this is constitutional or not, based off the Roe versus Wade, which is that's chaos. That's wreaking havoc in this country. That's more social bullshit than we need to go on right now. It's going to be some heave-ho bullshit going on.
Yeah.
Scary stuff when you think about it. I don't like it. Abortion is never a fun topic. That's when shit.
So, Nate, I think instead of turning your mic up, I think you turned it off.
Yeah, I think it's not there.
Oh, I thought he was just letting me talk. So he's been trying to speak? I didn't see.
I don't know.
I've been focused on you, John, because I'm trying to talk to you and have an intimate moment. And...
Nice.
Yeah.
Is that better?
By silence.
Hey, look, it's Nate. Welcome back, Nate.
But you're still sideways.
He'll fix that in a moment. That'll reorient itself.
There we go. All right.
So anyways, I couldn't be happier about the Roe versus Wade thing going away. I'm glad some people conspired to do it. So.
It's not saying it's going away. I'm just saying they're finding a way to bring it into potentially bring it into question.
It'll go away.
Because one thing that surprised a few folks about Kavanaugh is he hasn't necessarily been towing a party line when it comes to decision in the Supreme Court. He's been kind of playing an equal balance.
He's a little bit of a pussy.
Yeah. Maybe he's voting his conscience.
Yeah, which is a pussy conscience. Different from the one he said he had, so it's fine.
Well, he hasn't been called to decide on that one, and hopefully they won't. I don't think they need to revisit it. I think they just need to determine if people are going too far with this stupidity. This is fucking 2019. Let's stop talking about this issue and just put it away. Let's stop legislating it and put it away.
That's a good idea. We should start with us.
Right. If they did revisit
onto this,
I'm young. I feel like I want them to talk about it because I never had a chance to talk about it. And if they did revisit it and not strike it down, most likely there would be riots. So I think there would be some.
There wasn't that much rioting when they put it in place. So hopefully we can make it through this one.
That's because they just got the birth control pill and drugs legalized and everything, or drugs at least prevalent. So people were having a good old time. They didn't know what the fuck was going on.
There's a good chance. So, John, you
guys want to debate abortion instead tonight?
No.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, funny. Ironically, one of the words that I found, interesting word. Interesting
abortion?
Word. Oh yeah,
really?
Yeah, it's an interesting word then and now.
Abort?
Interesting. Abortion.
Abortion.
Wow.
Yeah, surprisingly enough, they that was a defined term in 1913.
Yeah, I looked it up and I thought it wasn't that different. So it seemed to be about the same definition.
All right, you guys want to get started? Get started?
No, fuck no.
No?
I don't want to talk about nothing. We've only been. You're eager, aren't you? You're an eager little beaver. I like that when you start gnawing on
Yeah.
the
Well-
wood and getting all excited. Look at Steven; he's just
Steven's
like bored out of his
moderating.
fucking mind.
No, no,
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
listening. I'm on board.
Look at
No,
him; he's just like
I like this.
he's.
And the rest, when you guys are talking, I'm like, that's what I'm, so you guys know I'm engaged.
Right.
Like, yeah, go on, yeah, fuck yeah.
I don't know what's going on anymore.
All right, no. Hey, if you want to get it started, we can get it started because I don't give a fuck. I'm ready to go. I got all my fun.
Oh,
My
I can't see the chat at all, but I'm happy for everybody who's here supporting me. So thank you very much.
Oh, don't
Especially
tell him
you.
there's nobody in
You
the
know
chat
who you
supporting
are.
him.
Yeah.
I'm just
There's at
messing
least
with you.
one
I was just
person
messing
who I
with you.
imagine would be supporting you. Sing Along Bear does say he likes your shirt. Or she,
Really?
I'm not sure. Yeah. So I like Nate's tropical shirt.
I don't know who Sing Along Bear. Well, I kind of remember Sing Along Bear, but I haven't
I know
watched.
there's a
Care
bunch of
Bears
bears
in a
that visit our chat.
Yeah, pretty much all the people with bear in their name support me. So
Is that like an Owen Benjamin thing?
Yeah.
Or,
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I thought. All the bears.
yeah, it's a right wing extremist group. So
I was
Pretty
making fun of
close.
Owen Benjamin on the
They
last
might
stream.
be- so be careful what you say. Most of them are pretty violent.
Yeah, I wish
Especially
they would.
Sing Along Bear.
Well,
Come at me, bruh.
well, that doesn't make me feel well. I'm a little
Hey,
nauseous.
it's no fun unless the stakes are high. I'm just kidding. Steven's got a look on his
See,
face.
Sing Along Bear said that's true. I'll sing
Really,
you to
this
death.
look means that we're not sure if you're kidding or not. That's what that look means. I mean, Jeffrey Dahmer made jokes too, but supposedly,
Man in a
I'm-
Hawaiian shirt.
That's how they get you, right?
No, you guys are great. You're
Aw, thank you. We're one of the good ones.
you'd never
Good
know it
work.
to read the chat. I'm just saying.
You only told me where you live today, so.
It's true.
Thank goodness we pinpointed the address and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're-
Don't worry about it.
We're in Florida.
Ask Steven. Steven's more moderate.
Am I? Yeah, I'm more moderate, but
He's the moderator.
Steven's hard to peg down.
It's true.
Steven's
It's
a
hard.
little bit hard to peg down. Like,
don't like
This is
arguing.
in
Well, you-
DC.
you know,
I was like that when I was in Seattle.
No, Steven's just a libertarian who doesn't like the label. That's what Steven
definitely,
is.
Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
small L, yo.
you know, I think
Yeah.
I think the thing that I appreciate about Steven is that he, like, his tone bespeaks malleability. Like, he's open to hear what you have, like completely open to hear what you have to say. But there's also that part where you think he's just going, yeah, okay, like agreeing with you to shut you up. But, not that you're disingenuous, you fuck, but I'm just saying.
Something you get from being in a city like that. When I was in Seattle, which by the way, I was very liberal, and then over the course of 10 years of living in Seattle, I became like as right wing as you can be. And you just get good at talking in such a way that everyone thinks you agree with them, even though you never gave them an opinion.
You can't
That's called
measure,
politicking.
You can't
Mhm.
measure whether someone's changed their mind. You can't even measure that shit. You can't even quantify it. So
Right.
if I could if I could test the brain chemicals and see, like, if you could show me a spectrum of how close someone is to being convinced, I would probably fight more. But it seems like no one ever openly admits they changed their mind. So it's kind of we're just live streaming.
Yeah, it's just that, it's that kind of mindset where it's like everything is questionable, and I think that speaks a lot to like the libertarian mindset is that everything's you got to question everything, right? So I mean, nothing's real until we have the stats, the facts, the something tangible to show me that this is real, that you're not blowing smoke up my ass, you goddamn government pieces of shit. Oh, sorry. I know how you libertarians are.
Yeah. If there's one thing libertarians love, it's the government.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, sing along. We make up words in this show. Don't worry. It
I'm
just
pretty sure
happens.
politicking is
It's
the real word.
it's
think
just
it is,
general asshatteriness that I like to I like to throw around.
I like that word, yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
General Asshattery.
Asshattery.
Yeah, that
I
was a
just
good
got
one.
invited to another stream.
Nice.
Yeah.
Look at you
I
making
tried
It
to
a.
wasn't
tell him.
by IP Freely, was it?
No, no.
No, it's IP peculiar.
I've met that guy, and I just don't trust him.
Well, he did invent the Yellow River.
That's right.
Yeah. Yellow Brick Road, too. That one took a little longer.
Wow.
Let's get this show on the road, huh?
We are on the road. We've been on the road for I don't know, 15 minutes.
15
You got to
minutes,
go to the
60
bathroom
minutes.
already? Are you already asking, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Stephen Ignoramus, I'm about to hand over control of the show to you to moderate El Debato.
That's right.
Do you
With
think
great
you
power
can handle the responsibility of keeping us in check?
I think so. I hope so.
Did you bring Did you bring a big stick?
I'm ready to speak softly.
God, I love it when he swings a big stick.
All right, so I guess we'll get this started. I don't know. I'm not going to control much other than the time, and I wrote the questions and some, I don't know, just some things to talk about. One thing I did have a question about before we get started. I mean, we're doing. So I guess I'll introduce the format of the debate, and so I'm going to read the resolution again, and we're going to have 3-minute opening statements by each of the two parties with no rebuttal. Then I'm going to ask my first question, and some of it will be just a question about. I'm just going to ask someone to explain their certain point of view on a part of the topic, but I don't know. Definitely, we want to keep interruptions and personal attacks and shit to a minimum. But I don't know what your guys' stance on. At some point, if I don't know if you guys feel like interrupting. If you feel like it would do really good, we could do it after the 2-minute counter rebuttal. So we're doing 3-minute answer to a question, 2-minute rebuttal by the other person, and then a 2-minute counter rebuttal, and then if you guys wanted to extend each round to, I think it said like a crossfire or like a round so that you guys could talk over each other a little bit to really hash something out. But I don't know if you're going to hash out like
fisticuffs.
Yeah, if you're going to hash it out like that, make it about something as specific as possible, because there are more questions coming. And then once we're all done, we can open it up to a general open discussion and questions from the chat or whatever. And I have that as like round 11. So I have like 10 questions, and round 11 would be just like an open discussion. So I don't know. If you guys accept, we will proceed.
Carry on, my wayward son.
All right. Okay. All right. So as I read earlier, here is the resolution of the debate. Webster's Unabridged English Dictionary. By the way, I added unabridged English because I bought the secondary school dictionary on eBay for $20. The unabridged English dictionary is something like $120. So I did not buy that, but that is an open source dictionary on the internet. Anyway, Webster's Unabridged English Dictionary of 1913 is more accurate and helpful in political discussions than Webster's Dictionary of 2019. Nathaniel is the pro and Robert is the con of this argument. Like I said earlier, I have the 1913 paper and the 1913 online, as well as the 2019 paper and the 2019 online. I kind of read the timing of the rounds, and I got my timer right here. What we're going to do is 3-minute opening statements for each of you, and Robert is going to go first. So if you're ready, we can do this. Ding, ding, ding.
Beautiful. Thanks, Stephen. Just first, I'll say thanks, Nate, for joining in this. It's hopefully it's going to be a good debate, and hopefully we'll have a good discussion about all of this. I love the English language. I love it so much that I write, I edit. I enjoy the subtle nuances of the language. I love how it evolves. I love how it changes. I love where it has come. And one thing that I understand about our language and the words we use is that no man specifically can define those words. We, as a speaking group, define what the language is. We define what the language means, what the individual words mean, and what they impart in their meanings. But we also understand that those evolve with us as the language evolves, with the times, with the culture, and to have any cognizant discourse with anyone in the present day, to speak in a language that reverts backwards in time to antiquated definitions of words, to, especially when we're talking about politics and the ruling of this country, the best tool that can be is one to use as interpretation of documents and rulings and discourse that was had at the time, so that we can better interpret what they mean and translate in the present day. That's the best that those can be as a translation tool, because dictionaries are going to be specific to a time. That's why they're updated every year. There's no way to avoid that. And we determine in our culture when a word comes in. And if something doesn't have a word that defines it, that doesn't mean it's not a thing. A ball wasn't a ball till we put a word to it and defined what a ball was, but the ball existed, or we wouldn't have been able to attach a word to it. But words are going to evolve. The meanings are going to evolve as we become more nuanced, as we individualize those words into their core parts. We have no way to avoid this. But how can we carry on any kind of logical discourse without standing on the current definitions of words? And one thing I will add about the 1913 that really brought a fallacy to the resolution of this debate is that the main reason why the 1913 version of the Webster's Dictionary wants to be upheld, why so many people support it, is because it is the last dictionary to have an extreme Christian bias in the definitions. And the right, there are a lot of people on the right that would love to see those terms maintained in that Christian mindset in the present day, with the idea that those Christian values from then hold in the present day.
All right. And so just real fast before you start, Nathaniel, last time with the debate with J. Edgar, I kind of interrupted a little bit too much when time was getting short. So when there's 10 or 15 seconds left, I'm just going to start going like this rather than speaking into the mic, okay?
Can you do me a favor and put up your right hand? Because the way this is, I can't see your left.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, okay, yeah. So I'll start doing that when it's like 10 or 15 seconds, okay? So 3 minutes to you.
I got a small sliver. I can only see your face. So, listening very closely to what Robert's saying, I wanted to make a big point about this debate, is that it's all about how helpful and accurate one dictionary is over another. So like he said, it doesn't mean that the dictionary has to be the authority on language. It's not. It's just a helpful resource. But what he said mostly was, and this is what I predicted, is it's theoretical. He said that if the language is evolving, then we need to use the dictionary that best represents that evolving language. Well, that would make a lot of sense if there was a significant difference between the two dictionaries. And so I want to just read a couple, and this is going to be boring, but I want to just read a couple of definitions from the dictionary, just very simple words, to give you guys an example of what we're dealing with. I'm going to deal with two: barbarism and disable. Okay, disable in 2019, the first definition is to make ineffective or inoperative. Okay, now notice how similar these two definitions are. In 1913, the first definition was to render unable or incapable, to destroy the force, vigor, or power of action of, to deprive of competent physical or intellectual power, to incapacitate, to disqualify, to make incompetent or unfit for service, to impair. There's absolutely nothing about that definition that's confusing. It's extremely detailed. So if they can prove to me the 1913 dictionary is irrelevant, then I'll concede this debate. But, you know, all you have to do is read a couple of definitions to realize the language hasn't changed that much. Now, that's one thing. The second thing I want to point out to you is how much longer and more descriptive the definitions were in 1913. So the second definition of disable was, in 2019, to impair physically or mentally, to cause disability. In 1913, it was to deprive of legal right or qualification, to render legally incapable. I'll just read it straight down from 2019. To make ineffective or inoperative, to impair physically or mentally, to cause disability, to deprive of legal right, qualification, or capacity. Okay, that's the 2019 definitions. The 1913 definitions are to render unable or incapable to destroy the force, vigor, or power of action enough to deprive of competent physical or intellectual power, to incapacitate, to disqualify, to make incompetent or unfit for service, to impair. Law, to deprive of legal right or qualification, to render legally incapable. 3, to deprive of that which gives value or estimation, to declare lacking in competency, to disparage, to undervalue. It's longer. It's more descriptive. It's more specific. Here's another one, barbarism. In 2019, first one is a barbarian or barbarous social or intellectual condition, backwardness. B, to practice or display of barbarian acts, attitudes, or ideas. 2, an idea, act, or expression that in former use offends against contemporary standards of good taste and acceptability. Okay, I'll just read one from 1930.
That's all the time we got for your opening statement. So
all right, well, everyone gets my point.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right. So so that was the opening statements, and now we'll go into the actual questions. So I'm sure we'll get a lot into the length and stuff like that. So I can I don't know. I'm going to write some questions on the fly as we go. But this first question is for Nathaniel. So like I said earlier, 3-minute answer, 2-minute rebuttal, 2-minute counter rebuttal after that. So for Nathaniel, what do you consider a political disagreement, and what role does having definitions from this year have in it? So this is kind of you can just expand on your opening point if you want, but yeah, what do you consider a political disagreement, and what role does having definitions from this year have in it? 3 minutes.
Well, I'll give you an example. If a Republican was talking to a Democrat and they wanted to use the word, barbarism, like I read, then they might say, well, you can compare what's happening to the United States to what was happening at the end of the Roman Empire. There was a lot of barbarism there, okay? And if you were going to have that discussion with a Democrat, and you were using the 2019 definition, it just repeats the word barbarous like 3 times in the definition itself, and it doesn't tell you anything. Everything's open to subjectivity, and in 1913, it's specific and it's useful. So political discourse, just as a simple definition, would be any argument about what's going on in government and in law in this country or in other countries. Although I think this resolution was specific to the United States. So.
And you still have another 2 minutes if you want to keep going. Or we can.
Well, I'll say this, that he said the reason why dictionaries are updated every year is because language evolves. And I can disprove that, but first of all, the idea that language evolves, which is true, has nothing to do with dictionaries. You have to understand how dictionaries are published and how they're run. I have documents in here. I don't have time to get into them, but maybe I will later in this, about the institution of the word homophobic or homophobia in 1960. And you can look up opinion polls of the American population, how much they even cared about homosexuals, and the fact that what was it, like 98 out of 100 people thought homosexuals were bad for society. And yet the word homophobia was specifically instituted by one man. His name was George Weinberg, and you can look up tons of quotes from him, in order to change the way Americans think. So the idea that language evolves and then the dictionaries evolve to suit that is totally backwards. It's actually the opposite, because of the way dictionaries are written nowadays. The dictionaries are written in order to change the way Americans think. And by the way, Daniel Webster knew that. That's why he was famous, was because of the way he talked. He started his dictionary because he was involved in politics, and he wanted to change America and make it better. And he was specifically, he was big around the slavery debate, and he wanted slavery not to be illegalized, but just to be limited to the South. And so he used, language, and American language especially, because he was the first one to do it, to change American thought. So it doesn't evolve. People use dictionaries to manipulate society. That's what happens. So I'm all done.
All right. So 2 minutes to you, Robert.
Any political discussion, of course, is going to require definitions. This idea that we, as the speakers of the language, don't evolve the language, that the dictionary is used as a tool to control the masses, I would argue that's not true, simply from the fact that because a term is coined, we can use homophobic. I'm guessing that person is some sort of doctor or scientist in some realm where he needed to describe a certain way of acting, much like racism was at some point. And Webster's Merriam-Webster's clearly talks about this. They say just because a word is not associated with something does not mean that the item or the actions that the word describes did not exist. They must exist to attach a word to it. Now, this idea that it's to control the masses, well, I would counter and say that the 1913 version of the dictionary was very much in line with controlling the mindset of the people reading the definitions by telling them that so many definitions revolve around a Christian fundamentalist view. There was a very strong religious bias to the definitions in the 1913 dictionary. References to God, references to Christianity, references to religion throughout the entire thing in common everyday definitions. And one of the things, as the editor at large at Merriam-Webster said, after 1913, Webster's wanted to make the dictionary more concise and easier to read.
Okay, and 2 minutes to you, Nathaniel.
Oh, to me?
Yep.
Well, I want to deal with the last thing you said there, but the first thing is the Christianity. 90% of the American population was white up until 1960, and that comes from the SPLC, actually. And, it's common knowledge. I don't have a source, but it's common knowledge that the vast majority of Americans were Christian. So the idea that the dictionary was written and by the way, when it says Christian bias, what's funny is I've got all these definitions up. I don't think a single one mentions Christianity or quotes the Bible at all. So just skimming through it really quickly. Although I did, going through this research, I did see quite a few that quoted the Bible. It never, pushed Christianity in a sense. In fact, I wish it would have more. It was always like the law is good and righteous. It said things like that. And so they would say, this is what the law means, and they would give an example from the Bible. The law is good and righteous, and that would be their example. So it's not pushing Christianity. That's ridiculous. And the idea that it controlled people, sure, but the change that happened in Americans where they became more negative towards slavery and maintained their Christian roots and developed a love for language, and we became more literate, is one that would be more accurate and more helpful for today than the current push, which is to make everything subjective and meaningless. And meaninglessness, which you can see in the examples I provided so far, meaninglessness is not the point of a dictionary. And yet you can see in those definitions that's what happens. And making it concise, that would matter if we weren't talking about political discussions. We don't have political discussions for the purpose of them being concise. That's great for the lowest common denominator, but when we're actually dealing with these difficult topics, we want things that are very specific and as long as they need to be to make the point. So that's all I got to say.
All right, cool. And I just we're going to move on to our next question, but yeah, I just looked it up that George Weinberg was a psychologist in the 1960s. So
yeah. I was going to say something about that. I forgot.
All right, cool.
I'll see if I can work it in.
This next question is for Robert. I'm kind of barking up the same tree as you were going up earlier, but why is it important that definitions be helpful in a political disagreement rather than just being true or accurate?
Well, when we get into, you look at words like ethnicity, if we look at ethnic, I mean, there's descriptions there, there's definitions there that we really have to, concern ourselves with, if your ethnicity is defined by whether or not you're Christian or not in a Christian leaning society, well, then we create bias. Then we create issues and problems. When we have any of this ideology from religion impacting government, right? This idea that, there's still this, in 1913, there was a strong belief amongst the population that God was the judge of all. But that is not current here in our population in the present day. Not everybody agrees with that. And so then I would say, okay, well, when we look at judgments, when we look at what a court rules, if they're ruling under this facsimile that they are men judging according to God, as his representatives here on earth. Well, if I don't believe in God, does that mean your ruling has no impact on me? Otherwise you're imposing it on me. This idea that these values that were held in a once upon a time, which is vastly different than 106 years later, vastly different. The landscape has changed in this country. So our definitions from then, when we didn't have such a diverse culture, when we didn't have so many religious groups vying against one another, many of them just among Christians themselves, which is, amazing to me. This idea that any one is right and should have any impact on our government through their definitions and through a reverse back to a time when that was the status quo but no longer is. I can't wrap my head around that. I don't understand how that's a feasible thing. But the definitions, we are in a society right now where we need literal specificity amongst our constituents. They're demanding it. Social media, look at the younger generations. Everything is about literal specificity. When one of our documents says all men are created equal, we now have to question that. Okay, what do we need to change that to encompasses everybody? This is why I say we need to change that to all citizens are created equal, because the definition of man doesn't appease everybody.
Okay. And 2 minutes to you, Nathaniel.
Okay, so pretty similar argument there, but let me just read some quotes from George Weinberg while I got the time. Let's see. Coming out to gays is a way of affirming sanity and self-worth. There is no universal coming out process as far as I know. Finally, fighting for gay rights, speaking out in various places and making friends, men and women, was great. I felt like an apostle of the obvious. I'm really not an avowed heterosexual. I'm no more proud of it than being white or tall. If every time you engage in a sex act, you go into a confession box, you will never accept your own sexuality. The only point I'm making is he's very clearly an activist. He's a psychologist. He's working to change people to be different. So that's very important. And then he brought up race and tied religion into it, which was really a discussion we had differently when I was talking about nationality, or ethnicity rather. And so I looked up the definition of race in the different dictionaries. In 2019, the first definition is a breeding stock of animals, and then a sub definition to that is a family, tribe, people, or nation. So they put people under animals, but that's fine. That's how they define it. A class or kind of people unified. There's nothing about religion in there. In 1913, there's still nothing. The descendants of a common ancestor, family, tribe, people, or nation, believed or presumed to belong to the same stock and lineage of breed. It's got nothing to do with religion. So I just wanted to make that point. And so it's important to keep on the resolution, which is whether or not this would be more helpful. And he said specificity was very important in political discussion. It is. That's why I endorsed the 1913 dictionary, which actually is specific instead of being subjective and using the same word over and over again in the dictionary. That's the word itself it's trying to define.
Okay. 2 minute counter rebuttal back to you, Robert.
Okay. So the idea that a psychologist is out there trying to change people, understand something. People come to psychologists because they need help. So the psychologist is there to help people, they're not going out, hey, do you need me to brainwash you? Hey, I'm looking for people to brainwash. This is not what psychologists do. Just this idea that because, someone coins a term, or because they're a head doctor, I don't know what it is that makes you think that he wants to control people, but that's a little far-fetched. That's not logical reasoning. Now, if he physically comes out and says, I want to control people's actions, so be it. But, the speaking to people, speaking to your constituents in a town hall meeting, speaking to the general voting public, if you are using a word that they understand as a specific definition, which will normally be based on present-day definitions of a word, using something that's more colorful and more broad-stroked is not going to help them. They need to understand exactly what you're talking about based off the definitions that they are currently aware of. How could we function if we suddenly said, okay, every definition you have is wrong, go back to 1913, and these are the correct ways to define something, when abortion only points to issues that are complicated during the birth process, that the child is aborted through death, that the child dies. Not the straight up abortion definition we understand today. It's the termination of a pregnancy. No matter what point it is, it's just the termination of a pregnancy. So they weren't as advanced as we were, so they didn't talk as concise and specific as we did.
All right, time's up. What's up? What are you showing?
Oh, it's backwards. He's quoted as saying, "Fighting for gay rights."
That's activism. That's not brainwashing. That's activism. Changing
he's
people.
Trying to change the way the country works.
He's trying to change people's minds. That's what people do in activism all the time. That's what it's for. Is to try and make a point and change people's minds, not change them into homosexuals. He's not trying to change people into homosexuals. He's just trying to be an activist for gay rights. There's a difference. I have a wife. I'm married with children, but I support gay rights, and I would be an activist in that regard. Does that mean I'm trying to make people gay?
Nathaniel?
As a counter rebuttal, where are we at?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're like, yeah, so I mean, when you guys have a disagreement after the end of the round, I don't mind doing a minute or two of just back and forth. I mean, we can't really talk over each other, but that's fine. So you can respond to what he's saying. Sure. I got the timer on, so.
So, if someone wants to fight for gay rights, that's fine. Because the people who listen to them should be knowledgeable enough not to fall for it, you know. But, you know, I do have a moral compunction against that person, but I have more of a moral compunction that people getting it. But the main point is if somebody puts a word into the dictionary specifically to fight for gay rights, which he says, in the quote, it's not hard to put together. He says fighting for gay rights was great. He says, I'm extremely proud of coining the word. You know, originally he coined the word specifically as a mockery of people who were against gay rights because he said they were secretly gay, and that was the homophobia.
Yeah, do you know how many words in the dictionary, in our language, are mockeries of things? Meme much? I mean, we have words that are used in the common vernacular that are eventually added to the dictionary. Was homophobic added to the dictionary the same year he coined it? Did you look into that? When was it added? Because he can't put a word in the dictionary. He can't do it. Merriam-Webster is not going to say, yes, give us. They don't hold auditions and say, send us words. They put words in that are being spoken by the people speaking the language. When they become common vernacular, they add it to the dictionary. Joe Blow doesn't have that option unless it's Urban Dictionary, and good luck with that.
Okay, 20 seconds to you, Nathaniel.
When it comes common vernacular, it's added to language or to the dictionary is not true. All you have to do is thumb through a dictionary and realize how many words are in there that we never use that some academic put in there. That's not how it works.
Name one.
I mean, I don't have it off the top of my head.
Because I very much, at least trust what Merriam-Webster says when they say we give words time and we put them in the dictionary when they become a common use word. Just like ain't. They fought against ain't so long, and then finally, when it's being used so often, they said, fine, we'll put it in the dictionary.
Okay, so we're going to go on to the next round, but it'd be a cool thing for you, John, to look up is the time difference between him coining the word versus when it got added to the dictionary.
I would love to be. I'd love to know I'm wrong there.
And I know you want to.
Let me just say one more thing.
Okay. Quick.
Every day, Merriam-Webster posts on their front page words we're adding to the dictionary today. And you can look at those words and realize that they're putting them in every day. It's not like we wait slowly. No, they're just trying to be as clickbaity as anybody else.
Is that right?
All right, we got to move on. Yep. Okay, cool. So the response, the response to this next one is to you anyway, Nathaniel. So
okay.
And you guys, you guys have kind of, when you've answered the questions and done your rebuttals, you've gone into other stuff as well. And I'm fine with you guys doing that. But so if you guys want to get into this more in the subsequent rounds, that's fine. But this for the Nathaniel, 3 minutes. What's more important, accuracy or helpfulness, and why?
Oh, accuracy or helpfulness.
Yeah.
Well, a dictionary is two things. It's a tool of authority, and it's a tool of help. Mature people understand that their language is not determined by the dictionary, but I think a lot of people take it as such an authority that it can shape culture. And so I would say it should be that it's helpful, but the fact that it needs to be accurate is because of a responsibility thing. It's like the Hippocratic Oath. They can do a lot of harm to weak-minded people who think that just because it's written into the dictionary, it's true. Just like because it's written into the newspaper, it's true. I don't know how Merriam-Webster's is edited. I don't think, Robert knows either. I could make guesses. Like I said, I think it involves academia. I actually tried to look into it, and it was very mysterious to figure out how they decided on these new words.
They use a staff.
And so,
yeah, I looked into it. They use a staff, and
it was pretty easy to find.
Yeah, they basically scan the common writings and common postings. They use a staff.
They scan what?
They scan like publications, books, and they use a staff of like hundreds of people to just scan the common writings of the given time.
Okay, how's the staff formed, and then how does that progress after that?
That's as deep as I got, but
because that's what I found out. But it's not like those hundreds of people all sit around and argue about it until there's somebody making that decision, and that's what I couldn't figure out. I understood that they used a large staff to find potential words, but it's the people who finally make the decisions I'm curious about, and I don't think they're representatives of common America. And all you have to do is look at some polls and people and what they think about current subjects, and then read definitions like definitions of homophobia, of ethnicity, of nation. Most people nowadays don't even really think nation has to do with your ethnicity, when it does. By definition, nation comes from the word people. I believe in Latin, but most people don't know that and don't think that, and yet the dictionary defines it modernly based off of people. So it's a tool of authority, and it's very persuasive to people to see it written in there. That's why accuracy is more important than helpfulness.
Okay, so 2 minutes or so to you, Robert.
I think accuracy is important in the present culture. I think it's more necessary now to be as precise as possible. It's this school of mind that being more you also want people to be more concise, because if you go into some long definition of a word, people begin to doubt your veracity. Whereas if you just say, abortion is the termination of a pregnancy, people understand that.
Oh.
That's a simple definition for people, right? This is, if we want to be accurate, if we think it needs more explaining, we will. But based off the common spoken words, when it comes to Webster's, according to Pete Sokolowski, who is the editor at large at Merriam-Webster's, it's a hell of a process. There are a large group of people who sit around and just comb through publications of our time, and they look for new words that are being used at a representative level to be added to the dictionary. At a representative level by the people who are speaking the language. So it's not arbitrary. It's based off of what is being published and what's being thrown out there through all different forms of media. I mean, just as easily as a psychologist, a talk show host could coin a term and it gained ground. Even myself, who knows how far ass hattery could go. It might even end up in the dictionary.
All right. 2 minutes back to you, Nathaniel.
I hate debate formats, just so y'all know. I much prefer open. 90% of persuasion, I think, is in asking questions, and it sucks to be in a situation where I can't ask too many of them. But I did want to just correct something that Robert said when he was talking about abortion in the 1913 dictionary. It is in the 1913 dictionary, and I'll read it to you. It is sometimes used for the offense of procuring a premature delivery, but strictly the early delivery is the abortion. Causing or procuring abortion is the full name of the offense. So the main difference there is that it categorizes it as an offense, but between the two dictionaries, you can do a number of definitions like that. When you say it should be more specific, and that the longer the definitions are, the less helpful they are. I don't want to just read definitions off to you, but the ones I read, it's not actually giving you a description of the word. The definition, and it went down, but the definition for barbarism was a barbaric act. Right. That's not helpful at all.
But if I were asked to define that, I would define it the same way.
Okay, but it wouldn't be helpful. It wouldn't teach anybody anything. It would leave everything subjective, and everything, which, by the way, subjectivity in a political discussion gets you nowhere. You have to define your terms first.
Sure. And that means look up barbaric.
Right? And you get... Oh, barbaric?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The dictionary is often one word leading to another because some words define others or are encompassed by others. John?
I've got an update. So apparently the first known use of the word homophobia was in 1969, and it was added to the Oxford Dictionary in 1993.
Wow.
So, first known use.
When was it added?
What's that?
When was it added to the Webster Dictionary?
I couldn't find that information for some reason. I just saw that it was added to the Oxford Dictionary in 93.
If you go to the Merriam-Webster site, you can go on the Time Traveler page, and you can plug it in, and it'll tell you when they added it to their dictionary. Of course, Oxford is kind of a collegiate dictionary, so you know those colleges, they take a while to get factual information in. I mean,
that's I found out that it was used first in 1969 from Merriam-Webster's site. And then I had to look all over the place to find the first time it was used in a dictionary.
Oh, yeah, they have a link up there, Time Traveler, that tells you when, if you plug in a word.
Oh, I see it, yeah.
You plug in a year or a word, and it'll tell you what year, or verse vice, I believe.
So let me kind of quick, not change up of the rules, but what I've been doing is like, if there's interjections and interruptions and it stays not talking on top of each other, all I'm doing is I'm just stopping the timer and keeping track of how much time is left in the person's round. So if it's helpful to go back and forth, that's great. And we can do that after the round's over, or or we can just do it during the round. So Nathaniel still has 30 seconds left in this round.
Yeah, that was my bad. I shouldn't have interrupted him.
No, it's fine. If it's helpful, the only reason for this is so we don't talk over each other and people listening get good audio and stuff. So if it's helpful, we can. That's what I was thinking about when Nathaniel, you just said you like asking questions and stuff. So if you ask a question to Robert during the round and he answers, I'll just stop the time. And we continue with these as loose time stuff, but if we're trying to figure stuff out, questions and interruptions are really necessary. So is Nathaniel there?
Well, looks like we lost Nate.
Looks like we lost Nathaniel. So
okay. So
anyway,
but yeah, I can't seem to find it on Merriam's Time Traveler thing either.
Okay,
if you want to look it
like
up,
in the blurb up there's a little red link that says "click here, use date," so you can go up and I think. Could have sworn it was.
Yeah, no, all it says when I go to the actual definition is when it was used first. First known use, 1969.
And you were doing homophobia, right?
Yeah.
So I see Nathaniel's avatar, but I do not see his video showing up.
We don't see his face.
That face, that beautiful face. So anyway, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Definitely thing that's got me thinking the most is like the idea of activist versus doctor. You can be both, but you also can be neither. Because there's plenty of activists on all sides these days that are doing that exact thing. But I'm not trying to sway opinion on the debate or whatever. But
right.
Oh, there's Daniel. All right.
If I can just say one thing is, I don't think, to your point, Stephen, I also don't think that there's anyone who can be called objective
Of
at all.
course,
Way.
absolutely.
So I think
Yeah.
no matter what you do, someone's going to be an activist to one
For
side or
something.
another, or
Sure.
for whatever it is. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, someone's going to have their bias.
All right. So Nathaniel, I'm not sure how much you missed, but we totally can ask questions to each other in the round, and I'll just stop the timer, and as long as it stays good audio and stuff, then whatever, man. Figure stuff out. So you've 30 seconds left in this round if you want to just give it a thought.
My my phone overheated. That was the problem.
Okay.
And I looked at the thermometer. It's 80 degrees in here. So, the best way for anybody watching this to decide for themselves would be to pull up different definitions. Don't rely on theoretical ideas. Just pull up the definitions, and you'll see that they're extremely similar, except one is more specific and more helpful. There's a couple of them where it's not more specific. You can look up the word sodomy, and it's a lot less clear, but in the 1913. But people don't usually use the word sodomy anyways.
Okay.
And, it all I would have to do is show them to you, but it's so pedantic to do that, and it's very difficult to make it work. So it's
okay. That's cool. Let's just move on to the next round then. So Robert, this next one's for you, and I guess the next two rounds are kind of I'm not going to openly say there's a hole in each one of your guys' argument, but it's just a question I have about the way you're thinking about it. So my question for Robert, same thing, 3, 2, 2. So how does your view on words and definitions in the long run not end in endless subjectivity and definitions being changed by the mob just by feeling so? In other words, is there a thing that will ever ground us, given that the evolution of words is in the future is literally endless? And is that a good or a bad thing?
Well, no, it's absolutely never going to change. I mean, our language is going to continue to grow. I mean, and change as we move along. I mean, eventually. So if we want to project, 100 years from now,
yeah.
Well, 100 years from now, we might be traveling in space throughout the cosmos. How we perceive life and spirituality, various things, is going to be changed. It's going to be impacted in some way, shape, or other, especially if we run into sentient life out there, right? So our entire viewpoint is going to shift, which means that our dialogue is going to change. The language with which we have that dialogue is going to change, and it's going to conform to the times. We won't be able to look back at how these definitions, words that we used to use that aren't relevant anymore. I mean,
So if we can't look back, a big concern from people on my side of things is the rewriting of history and the loss of understanding beyond just the last 50 years. So if we can't look back, isn't that a bad thing? Isn't that a reason why we'd want to preserve an old dictionary?
well,
And maybe say this one is the one for political discussion so that it will last,
No, I think if you want to stop history from being rewritten, have it start being taught more prevalently in our schools as opposed to being glossed over. That's how your history is being rewritten by our education system, because we're not getting a history education. We're not learning about the fundamentals of what made this country great and where we came from and the origins over in Europe. We're not learning as much about that anymore because history is so convoluted and so deep that it has to be brought down in conciseness. We can't rewrite history with definitions of words because we still use many of the same words and they mean very similar things. It's just that even Merriam-Webster said it. The definitions were so long and colorful and derivative that it needed to be made more concise and easier to read and understand by the society at large because the society was growing. And the language was evolving so fast because it is a conglomeration of so many. There is no true English. Understand that. English is not an original language. It is a conglomeration of multiple languages. Yeah, do you know the bulk of our Old English was infused from France? We didn't even have a word for beef. We called it cow. They called it beef. Guess what we call it now? Beef. It's French. So we owe so much of our language to other countries. Of course it's going to evolve, and of course it's going to change, and it's going to continue to do so.
You're talking about 1,000 years, which is a lot different. Now,
really?
but
Because
the
100
question
years
is,
has been kind
so,
of crazy too, because we have racism now. We understand
buddy,
what it
but
is. We understand what other things are because we have new definitions for them. Yes, times change.
The question was about rewriting history, which
Dictionary can't do that.
let me finish.
Hey, let's avoid interrupting.
Yeah, I mean, Robert has 10 seconds left, and it's 2 minutes to you. So you have any closing thoughts right here, Robert?
Yeah, that's just what I said. A dictionary can't rewrite history. It might redefine it, but it won't rewrite it.
Okay. All right, 2 minutes to you, Nathaniel. Thank you, John.
I'm just going to keep asking questions.
Okay.
So the question was about rewriting history, and you said, well, what we need to do is just teach history more in school. I mean, don't you realize how many the majority of people on my side of things, the vast majority of people, do not trust, on my side of things, on the conservative side of things, do not trust public education at all. So when you talk about one solution is to increase the amount of history in public education, which essentially means the amount of control public education has over history, that doesn't seem like a great solution. So one thing is, I don't know if you realize this looking through the definitions, but one of the things they cut out in order to make it more concise was the history and the elongated and descriptive history of how the word was formed. In the 1913 version, it will tell you where the word came from, how it came to use, and all those things in detail. It doesn't do that nearly as much in the 2018 version. I didn't see. I mean, it was there on occasion, maybe a couple of words. It wasn't the paragraphs that was written in the 1913. You might say, well, it's really annoying to read that. Who reads a dictionary? You just look it up. You find what you need to know. The more information that's in there, the more useful it is as a tool. And that was one of the things they cut out, was the history of the word. So, don't know if you noticed that.
Okay, you want to go to Robert? Right, okay.
Sure.
Yep. 2 minutes.
Yeah, I don't think it holds water. I mean, when you write a book, you want it to be concise. You want it to get the point across. Derivative language, text, extensive explanations. People don't want that anymore. We don't live in a society where that's conducive. We live in a society that is quick. We need a quick definition now. I need to know what this word means immediately. I don't have 5 minutes to read long diatribe in a 1913 dictionary that gives me colorful ways of looking at this word. I just need to know what it means. We're in a instant gratification society, and speaking to them in terms that were well rounded in 1913, you're not going to have the same level of discourse, the same level of clarity, because you're going to be intending something that they may not be parsing out. So I don't know how that's helpful to a discussion if two people are talking two different languages, and by that I mean English from 1913 and English from 2019. And this idea that the far right is not fans of public education. I'm just going to point out that No Child Left Behind, if I'm not mistaken, was a right-leaning program put into play that fucked education. So any public education that the right is not a big fan of, you made your own bed. And that's where our public education system has gotten to. We don't have trade schools because we have parents who are too caring about their kids to want to be told that their kid doesn't have what it takes to make it through high school, but they do have what it takes to get an education that'll allow them to make $20 an hour at 17, 18 years old. This is the kind of society we're in. We need to coddle our children. We need to make it easy for them. And that's why having discourse with them is important based off of the words they know and understand.
Okay. So, yeah, we can do a quick couple minutes of back and forth if we want on this one.
Before this debate and this research you're doing, when was the last time you used a dictionary?
2 days ago. I do it regularly when I'm editing.
Okay. So how did you use it?
I type in define word. I type define, and then I put the word into Google, and it pulls up various dictionaries. And I typically use either the Oxford or the Merriam-Webster's. Those are old school sources.
Okay.
Those are that's what I go back to whenever I look up words, because that's what I've always used growing up.
What was the word you were using?
I don't remember. Shit, it was something from. I was just looking for. I think I was trying to make sure I was looking at the right spelling to determine if Microsoft Word was throwing me an error over a correct spelling, or how the word was being used, if it was being used the right way. I can't remember what the word was specifically. I do it multiple times during a week.
Was it political? Was it about a political thing?
I don't believe so.
Was it a part of a political discussion?
No.
So in a political discussion where you're deciding upon how the country should go and you're arguing it out, would it be more advantageous to have things be quick and easy and instantly gratifying? Or would it be more advantageous to have things be thorough, detailed, specific, and without error?
I'll take instant gratification. Thank you.
Okay. Well,
I mean, I think you're wrong.
I would argue that most
remember, the fundamental right is not as big as you think. And to generalize so much of the population based off the thinking of the fundamental right, I disagree with that.
It's not as small as you think.
Oh, it's small enough that I understand that it doesn't make up a majority of this country, and the majority of this country is mixed, and a bunch of mixed people who are not going to follow the ideas and thinkings of one specific group in a country where all groups are allowed because we have freedoms.
You know, that's true, and that's why I would say the 2019 dictionary is less helpful, because it describes the feelings and opinions of a specific group, whereas the 1913 is much more open and broad and includes people like Christians, which, by the way, still includes the majority of this country. And I think it's like 80% that think. How many people
define?
But see,
yeah. I mean, look, guys. If we don't have numbers in front of us about as far as population and census and stuff like that, we're gonna move along. I mean, if you guys,
fuck that. Everyone knows these numbers.
No, everyone doesn't know these numbers, because I would argue that 80% of this country is Christian is a wrong assumption. I would say that you need to back that up with facts.
I didn't say 80% of this country is Christian.
Okay.
The majority of this country is Christian. I said, what was it? 80% of people who thought the abortion law in Alabama was fair or too lenient.
Yeah.
Which is pretty radical to say the Alabama.
For Alabama.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's specific to Alabama.
No, I believe that was across the whole United States. That's why I asked.
Polled people. Yeah, it was 79% across polled people across the United States. It's one of the things. We are going to move on to the next round, but that's one of the things that bothers me about polls in the first place is a media organization will say in this poll 79% of Americans, but it's polled Americans. And and we're not going to debate abortion here, but like unless you're ready to I'm just saying, like, unless you're ready to cite the population, your answer can't be "fuck that," and it can't be,
it
from
sure
either
can
people.
be when his argument is
cite it. Cite it. I'm sorry.
He didn't cite that it was a small. He just threw it out there. Oh, it's
I'm saying the same thing to him. I'm saying the same thing to him, and we're gonna move along.
Yeah, you're right. I'll concede the point. I don't have anything that shows me for sure that the right isn't the majority in this country, but I'm pretty sure the Muslims.
I'm just saying this is not a statistical and population debate,
right.
and I'm just saying to stay objective. You saying "fuck that" is the same thing as Robert saying that it's not the majority. If neither are cited, we got to move along. So we're going to. Okay. All right. The next question is for Nathaniel. This is pretty simple. Noah Webster, the first Merriam-Webster or just Webster's dictionary was written in 1828. And it was kind of his magnum opus or whatever. He was 70 years old at the time. He poured thousands of hours of his life into it. Why not that year? Why not the third international version of 61? Why not the Oxford Dictionary? In other words, why specifically this year?
Oh, I think people should use all of them. I just wanted to pick a year that would be accessible, that I thought Robert would be able to get a hold of and research easily, or make this debate simple. That's what I wanted to do. But I think people should read all of them. I think when you type into Merriam-Webster and it says since 1828, and you think, oh, these definitions go back since 1828, when they update that damn thing just about every day. So it's got absolutely no roots to it, and it's not, when Daniel Webster wrote it is Daniel, right? But when Webster wrote it,
Noah.
Is it Noah?
Yeah, I believe so, but doesn't matter.
Daniel. Anyways,
sorry, it's cool.
He was a bullfrog. Sorry.
Still got 2 minutes, Nathaniel.
When he wrote it, he was at a time, it was in 1828, which was only 50 or so years after the country began a war to found it. He was at a time where he wanted to put the history of everything into it so people could grasp it. In 1776, one of the things you said was that people are becoming more literate in this country. In 1776, you're going to say I don't have anything to cite this, but
No, let me stop for a second. So it's when we get into an interrupting back and forth, and it's like, no, majority know this, no, fuck that. I mean, you can say what you want, but if it becomes a debate, I'm just trying to not have it become a debate about population and statistics. I mean, it's a debate about and we're welcome the people watching, or John or whoever is welcome to fact check stuff. It's just when we're interrupting each other with different statistics. And we still have a minute 10 to you, Nathaniel. I stopped the time, but just a quick thing. My question was a little bit unfair because the resolution was not 1913 is the best. The resolution was just 1913 is better than 2019. So really the onus is not, I know the premise is not, you're not saying that's the best one. You're just saying that's better than the 2019. So continue for
and that's
a minute
important to understand. Yeah. I was going to say in 1776, the poorest people in America were more literate on average than a lot of the middle classes in Europe. And a lot of that was because of Ben Franklin and the success of lending libraries in the United States. People read a lot more in the United States than they did in almost any other country. And so Noah Webster was famous for using words. He was a famous orator speaking on the issues of his day, and he cared a lot about his country. And so when he wrote that book, the point was to give them roots to what they were talking about in their political discussion, because this country was founded on political discussion instead of one particular monarch or something like that. So he thought it was very important. And that's the whole point of this is we ought to be able to read. And the idea of dumbing down a dictionary to make it faster is not something that is helpful or accurate. Hence the resolution.
Okay. And I just Googled it. It is Noah Webster. So 2 minutes to you, Robert.
I'm going to Google Daniel Webster. God damn it.
Daniel and Daniel Webster and the devil. Daniel and the devil. Daniel Webster and the devil is the story you're looking for that. That's what you're looking up.
Daniel Webster was a congressman.
Daniel Webster. Do you remember the Daniel Webster and the devil? What was it? And I want to say that's where the term devil's advocate was coined.
Oh, really?
I might be getting two people confused.
Yeah. I mean, Daniel Webster was a famous congressman.
But what was the story about Daniel Webster and the devil, or was that referring to Noah Webster? What was that? God, that's been so long, and I'm old. But anyway, what was the
2 minutes to you?
Oh, about 1828. Well, look, I'll say this about 1828, 61, any iteration of the dictionary up to 1913. I don't understand the idea that you wouldn't use those. I would think that the smarter thing to do is you would want to use the 1828 because it's much closer to the ratification of the Constitution of the United States, and would be much more useful in any discussion about politics when our politics are always referencing a document created at that time. But one thing that has to be said about that dictionary, from 1828 to 1913, words were added, the language changed, the language evolved. 1913 is a sticking point for many people because it was decided to make the dictionary more concise and took out this mass of unnecessary garbage that was just bogging down a dictionary, which was filling up with more and more words. It's it's just kind of a time consumption thing. But I don't understand why the 1828 wouldn't be an even better dictionary than the 1913 if we were going to have that argument. Because again, much nearer the time where the documents that this country is founded on, where our politics are supposed to be based, were formed. So that should be the argument.
Yeah,
and again, I will argue that that is only a tool to help in the translation into present-day terms that may or may not have evolved from the point they were originally termed.
Cool. Yeah, the 1828 dictionary is better. And by the way, I did get two people confused. I got Daniel Webster confused with Noah Webster. So everything I said was pointless and meaningless. But I will say this, that Noah Webster was a descendant of William Bradford, who, if you don't know, was the leader of the Plymouth County. He was the son of politicians. So the point stands. He cared a lot about the country. Now, let me just ask you, how would you define the word, Robert? How would you define the word, let's see, what's a good one? How would you define the word cognition?
Cognition, functional conscious thought, logical reasoning. Maybe I'm synonymizing more than I am defining, but those are the things that come to mind whenever I think of the word. I don't read the dictionary to have the precise definition by heart.
The precise definition. The point I'm going to make is, I think that the terms and the language people use and their understanding of the definition is oftentimes more precise and more accurate than the 2019 dictionary. Because you just heard what Robert said. Okay, let me read for you what the dictionary 1913 said. It said the act of knowing, knowledge, perception, that which is known. Okay, you know what the definition in 2019 is? Cognitive mental processes. That's the definition of cognition.
Right.
It's not helpful and not accurate, because it leaves out the second definition that existed in 1913, which is that which is known. What you defined it
but
as,
that which is known is now
was better than what the dictionary.
Hang on, Robert. Yeah, keep going.
What you said was better than what the dictionary said. Nowadays, if you look up in the modern dictionary, it's not evolved. It doesn't describe what people actually think the words mean. It does a shitty job. So you can't use, when you're defining a word like cognition, the basic rule of a dictionary is you can't use the word in the definition. And it does. It does over and over again in all these. The cognitive mental processes. It relies on it.
Right.
You did a better job than the dictionary did.
No, actually.
So this theory about things evolving and becoming more helpful for our modern discourse is not true. You could just pull something out of your ass that was more helpful for our modern discourse in this crappy dictionary that some half-ass put together just to confuse us.
Hold on.
Let's do some back and forth.
To rebut that, what that definition from 2019 did was say exactly what I did in a more concise way. And as an editor, currently editing for the internet, for what people are reading, conciseness is key. Reducing things down to smaller amounts of reading to keep readers attached to get to the end. This is where our reading is going. Reading is being abbreviated, condensed. So yes, they said exactly what I said in a concise way. And what was the second definition you pulled from 1913? Tell me that.
Well, what's interesting.
What was the second definition you pulled from 1913, please? The other one you referenced. Just tell me what it says. The definition you gave, please.
Tell me if you think it's concise.
Can I please finish my thought? I'm asking you to tell me what you already read. What does it say?
That which is known.
That's called knowledge. We define that's knowledge. Now, that's what knowledge is. That's what I know knowledge to be now. That which is known. That's knowledge. So it's not necessary as part of cognition. The 2019 term is the most concise way of saying exactly what I said, and it gets the point across to anybody who understands what those words mean. And I do.
Okay, 30 seconds to you, Nathaniel. Move on.
30 seconds?
Yeah.
Well,
just a thought,
address the Achilles heel, which is that it used the word in the definition, which defeats the whole point of a dictionary. It's great if our modern reading is becoming briefer and stupider. There's a lot of people who are not happy about that, but regardless, a dictionary is not for pleasure reading; it's for help. And there's nothing non-concise about the 1913 dictionary. That which is known, the act of knowing, knowledge, perception, concise. They did the same thing. They made it more confusing because the words they used, because they said cognitive mental processes,
Right.
which is much more difficult to understand than the other one, and it's less concise. It might be smaller, but the words are much more difficult to understand. You have to go look up all three of those words.
Okay, so I don't have to look up cognitive because I understand that it's a form of cognition, which is a defining act versus the overall term. You have to cognitive, mental, what?
Processes.
Okay, so you need to look up what mental means.
If I'm looking up cognition, the word mental is
right,
not
and you stated you would have to look up all three of those words. Because two of those words are very simple words. Processes, when it comes to mental, even those two words together is very simple to understand. Mental processes, cognitive.
It's no simpler than cognition. It's supposed to be helpful. Myself, I wouldn't need to look up the word cognition, which stands to my point that it's not for pleasure reading. It's a tool for people to understand a word.
Right.
And that doesn't help them understand it. It's just as complicated as the word.
A dictionary is not supposed to be pleasurable. It's a dictionary. It is very much just supposed to give you information so you can move on with what you're doing. It's not about being a book. It's not about being colorful and beautiful and flowery. If you want that, go to the Urban Dictionary. That's much more colorful. They have that for you. But a dictionary works hand in hand with a thesaurus. There you get into some colorful stuff. You want to see all the different ways a word can be used? Get into the thesaurus.
I think the 2019 is more colorful than the 2013 or the 1913.
Cognitive mental processes seems colorful to you?
Yes.
I don't know. Well, if it seems colorful to you, then what is the issue with it? Because it seems pretty definitive.
Because it's not helpful or accurate.
I think so because I understand all those words. For you, you see how it becomes subjective. This is not, we can't, so we have to go with the common vernacular that everyone uses and not predate ourselves into an antiquated set of definitions, especially if you're going to have a discussion in our political climate about racism. You can't have it from a 1913 standpoint because it's not in there.
Last thought, Nathaniel.
If I did not know what the word cognition was, and I pulled open a dictionary and I read cognitive mental processes, I would still be just as confused and not be able to continue along my day. If I did not know what the word cognition meant and I read it and it said the act of knowing, I'd be like, oh, now I get it. And I would be able to move on with my day. Therefore, it's more accurate, it's more helpful. And the words that exist now that didn't exist back then, I made the point with homophobia that a lot of it's activism and all that, but
don't fucking tell me racism is activism, because I'll tell you right now, you don't want to go down that road. Racism is a thing.
We may.
Racism is a fucking thing. And to say it's just about activism, fuck you. It's people killing people, hating people for nothing more than their race, and that is fucked up.
I think you would have a very hard time getting people to agree on the definition of the word racism. Most people would disagree with your definition, which is killing people. Which
oh no, it was a part. Killing people was kind of a part of
it. We gotta move
Sorry,
along.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So again, let's keep the interruptions and then also personal attacks.
Just two more.
That's how many you have left.
Yeah, I'm gonna moderate. I'm gonna moderate this stuff, and John's doing a good job too. But you guys got to police yourself a little bit,
Damn it.
Because it's a perfect transition though. We just talked about that one word, but now we're gonna move on to what you guys had prepared. So last night I asked you guys to each come prepared with 2 words. Robert said he might have more. that that you kind of want to debate, or you feel like one version didn't have a good definition and the other did? So who is? Yeah. So actually, Robert is first. So we can either do both words or do one word at a time and just go back and forth. So Robert, what is one of your words that you want to talk about?
Well, I think that we have to look at marriage. Marriage is a big one. Back in 1913, marriage was defined as the act of marrying or the state of being married, legal union of a man and a woman for life as husband and wife, wedlock matrimony. Now, today we don't define marriage the same way. So to rely on that,
Who's the we?
That applies to you too, though. Yeah, it
as a
applies to you too,
country,
though. I'm
we can't.
interrupting.
As a country, we can't use that definition because it imposes a point of view on people. And especially if we wanted to really look at that hardcore, it specifically says it's the legal union of a man and woman for life. So divorce wouldn't be possible anymore. According to that, divorce is not a thing. But we have divorce. So how would we accommodate that? Whereas, what I did find interesting was that the 1913 definition of marriage did allow for homosexual marriage, though. Because the fourth definition does say an intimate or close union. So in 1913, according to that statement, gay marriage was supported as well.
Okay, we're going to keep these ones shorter since it's just about specific words. So a minute to you, Nathaniel, and then we'll go back to Robert.
Well, it's a very strong point he made by talking about the fourth definition of marriage. I think it's a deliberate misreading of what it's talking about. It's talking about a generic term, as in, I am married to my job. It's very clear that it's no longer talking about wedlock or a legal process.
I wish they had been more colorful in that.
So it allows for gay marriage in like a metaphorical sense, but not in the sense you're talking about. Now, this just supports my point about activism. We as a country, see, the problem is when you say we as a country believe something, and then the only basis for that is what's written in the dictionary. So it's very easy for someone to who is influential in the Merriam-Webster organization to change a definition in order to change what we the country believe. It's not true that we the country believe that's the definition of marriage. We have a separate term for gay marriage. It's called gay marriage. The Greeks had homosexual unions, and they thought it was more sacred than the union, than marriage between men and women. They just didn't call it the same word because it wasn't that word. And by the way, communist organizations, social governments, they always attack the definitions of words in order to unseat a society's culture. And that's written in the manifesto. It's written in the whole strategy for destroying things. So we, the country, are very concerned about communism and very concerned about subversion in general. And by the way, racism was coined around the same time as homophobia.
Okay. So a minute back to you, Robert, and then we'll move on.
Just real quick, I don't know if you've heard this old joke. You know what gay people call marriage, Nate? Marriage. That's the only term they use. They don't say we're going to go get gay married. That's what those on the outside, like us, would refer to it as.
There's a higher divorce rate and a much higher.
Actually, if you could show me those statistics, because I'll
disagree
with that.
That's not the point.
Nothing to do with the definition, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep going, Robert.
Neither is what you said. So.
Keep going, Robert.
There were some other terms I looked at. One of the things, abortion. Abortion was a word that I pulled up, and one of the things that I found interesting, Nathaniel touched on part of the definition that it is sometimes used for the offense of procuring a premature delivery. Notice it says procuring a premature delivery, which intends the delivery of the baby as opposed to the death of the baby from my taking of how that's worded. But strictly the early delivery is the abortion. So they're saying just the early delivery itself is the abortion. But the other definitions is, the immature product of an untimely birth, the act of giving premature birth. When we talk about abortion, these definitions refer to birth happening somewhere along the path, whether it's early, untimely, the baby's born dead, at an early point. Whereas now it's simply defined, and there's a little bit more that goes into the definition, but the crux of the definition is the early termination of a pregnancy. Period. The early termination of a pregnancy. When we talk about it from the aborting a baby standpoint. And so that clarity, I think, would need to be expounded upon should it be in a political discussion.
Okay, 1 minute back to you, Nathaniel. Then we'll move on to the next word.
He's just misreading it, which I guess would be...
How am I misreading?
Hey, man,
oh, my God.
let him. He's going to say it.
Yeah.
Which I guess would be a point against me, because it shows how someone even as skilled an editor as he could be confused by more accurate and more helpful language.
Okay, your passive-aggressive insults, unnecessary. Don't.
Sorry.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Anyways, well, okay, so you're misreading it. It's a sub note to the first definition. The first definition centers around miscarriage, which is obviously the death of the baby. So when it says procuring that first definition, so it says it is sometimes used for the offense of procuring a premature delivery. And the first definition says the act of giving premature birth, miscarriage, it's denoting death.
Okay.
Denoting death.
In the miscarriage, a miscarriage does, yes.
Before it is capable of sustaining life.
Sure. Right. The act of giving premature, particularly the expulsion of the human fetus. This one refers specifically to miscarriage. That's called a contagious abortion. Is what that's commonly now referred to, is called a contagious abortion. Spontaneous abortion, if that makes it easier for you to understand, that's what that's called. It's still referred to as an abortion, but yes, that. But where in this does it talk about cutting the baby out to get rid of it so you don't have to have it? Because procuring a premature delivery, I'm pretty sure that delivery means taking possession of, someone wanting to take that baby. That's how that reads to me.
Okay.
Which would have been a crime to take someone's baby out of their belly.
All right. We got to move on. Do you want to respond 30 seconds, Nathaniel, or do you want to move on to the next word?
No, that's fine. We can move on to
okay.
next.
So just understand, Robert, your two words were marriage and abortion, or was the abortion?
No, those two. Those are fine.
Okay.
Yeah, those are fine.
All right. Let's move on to Nathaniel. So yeah, what's your first word?
Christian.
Okay.
In 1913, it was one who believes or professes or is assumed to believe in Jesus Christ and the truth is taught by him, especially one whose inward and outward life is conformed to the doctrines of Christ. And it has a couple other definitions in there that are...
Go ahead. Keep reading the second one, please.
Okay. One born in a Christian country or of Christian parents and who is not definitely becomes an adherent of an imposing system. So I think there's a typo in there. And then the third one is one of a Christian denomination. Now, this one is repeated in the next one, so I just, for time, I don't want to read it because it's basically the same in 2019. So, do you want me to read it? I can read it.
Sure.
Okay. One of a Christian denomination which rejects human creeds as bases of fellowship and sectarian names. They are congregational in church government and baptized by immersion. They are also called Disciples of Christ and Campbellites. One of a sect called Christian Connection of Open Communion Immersionists. The Bible is their only authoritative rule of faith and practice. And then it gives a pronunciation.
Okay. So why did you pick that one?
Because in 2019, it says one who professes belief in the teachings of Jesus Christ. And a big distinction here, and then it says the hero in Bunyan's Pilgrim Process, it says a member of one of the churches of Christ separating from the disciples of Christ, which is why I said it's repeating the other one. And then same with that third definition. So the one in modern language only says one who professes belief in the teachings of Jesus Christ. Okay. The one in 1913 says, one who believes or professes or is assumed to believe in Jesus Christ and the truth is taught by him, especially one whose inward and outward life is conformed to the doctrines of Christ. So when me and Robert have a discussion, like we have, where he talks about Christians and how they've acted, and I said, well, those people are not Christians. This definition in 1913 explains what I'm talking about. The definition in 2019 isn't helpful at all, and it doesn't explain that just because someone who professes belief in the teachings of Jesus Christ is not a Christian. It's not.
All right.
Anybody who understands the religion knows that.
All right. So that was 2 minutes. So Robert, back to you.
The current definition of Christian is right on point. And just FYI, this was one of the words that I had pulled up, one of the 4 or 5 words that I had pulled up, because there were a couple of interesting things I found about this. In the present day society, when we're talking about Christians, the one factor that we have is the definition that's given in the present day dictionary. That's the one thing they all have in common, is a belief in Jesus Christ. Because they don't... There's so many groups, subgroups among Christians that follow different biblical texts, revised biblical text, no biblical text, new biblical text. We can't define Christians in the old school way anymore. Because, I mean, hell, who do you know that lives their life as, their inward and outward life is conformed to the doctrines of Christ? I think any extremist who talks about killing anyone in this world that touts themselves as a Christian, and we've seen them in various places in this country, that's not Christ-like. That's not what Christ would have done. And then the number 2, it says one born in a Christian country or of Christian parents and who has not definitely becomes an adherent of an opposing system. So we no longer have Christian converts now. We're not considered Christians if we convert. Because I think the Christians want to up their numbers, don't they?
All right. 1 minute, back to you, Nathaniel. Then move on to your second word.
I don't think I want to respond to that, because it's just, the only way I could would be by just saying that from the inside of the religion, there's not... it's very clear that what you said is not accurate. And I think if I was going to say that, it would be extremely offensive. So I don't even want to get into it.
Well, you did, so
But
expound on it.
It's...
I mean, just for a little backstory, Robert you're an atheist, right? And
no, I'm not an atheist.
Okay.
I'm pretty much more agnostic than anything. I'm kind of offended. I'm kind of offended, right, when I'm called an atheist.
Sorry.
No,
yeah,
I don't buy in. I don't buy into the fantasies. No, I don't believe in it.
Gotcha. Well, okay, so but you're not a Christian, Nathaniel. You are.
Yeah.
Right.
And
so
a majority,
Nathaniel, yeah.
And a majority of the people in America still profess to be Christians. And so, if you are a Christian, you understand what someone means when they say, well, they're not really a Christian. And it has a lot to do with inward and outward life. And so there's no way you could understand that. And that has a lot to do with politics, because when you talk about the majority in a democratic republic, that has everything to do with politics. So you wouldn't be able to understand the religion from outside of it, you wouldn't be able to understand what we're talking about when we talk about this. And it's a political discussion. And the second one, it doesn't eliminate the possibility for converts at all. It's just offering another definition, because sometimes people say, I was born Christian. Obviously, you can't be born Christian unless you're making a theological argument for that. It's just another, it's like, you would say, well, he was born Christian. It's just another definition. It doesn't eliminate converts.
Well, I guess I'm just saying your 1913 version says you can be born Christian if you're born in a Christian country or of Christian parents.
It's just defining what people mean by that.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah.
Because they were saying I was born a Christian back then?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, they might not have said it that way, but it was the same concept.
So they needed to put a definition to qualify what people were saying. So they were adding a definition to qualify what the people were saying. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Kind of like racism.
And people still say that today, and yet it was taken out of the dictionary, which is why I think this dictionary is less accurate and helpful.
Well, I'm just gonna point out that your argument that just because the country may lean towards Christianity through the majority, that doesn't pull well with an amendment that tells us we all have freedom of religion, and we need to discuss politics based off Christian leaning.
You don't think that it's important to understand what the majority of the country believes in a political discussion?
No, your beliefs mean shit to me. Your beliefs mean shit to me. How you act and your morals and actions are what are important.
Well, that's just not helpful.
That's bullshit. Why do I care what you believe in my daily life? What does that matter to me?
If you're in a political discussion,
it doesn't matter. It only tells me the groundwork from where you're going to build your morals and take your actions. That's all it tells me. That's all your beliefs tell me, because you're not going to make me believe what you believe.
Politicians talk about it all the time because they realize those are the people who are deciding whether or not they will have a job.
And I don't care what they believe. I wait and see what their actions are. Then I make decisions about that person.
If you don't care about what a politician believes, it doesn't change how helpful a dictionary would be by actually explaining something that is so important to the American population.
If you think campaign promises are what that politician truly believes, enjoy the smoke being blown up your ass.
Let's move on. Okay, so next, so that was the word Christian. Let's move on to our final word of this round. So next word to you, Nathaniel. Okay.
Give me a second.
No problem. Okay, so just yeah, that's fine. So I'm gonna just fill the air real fast. So we're looking at the study that John linked in the notes, in the CIA study of, I believe this is a census or something, because it looks like they did the whole population. And so this is from 2014, so 5 years old, granted, but it says that 46.5% Protestant, 20.8 Roman Catholic, other Christian 0.9. I don't know whether people consider Mormon to be Christian. I just don't know. So that's 1.6. So in 2014, well over the majority of the country identified as Christian.
As Christian, correct.
Yeah. So just saying. All right. So last word to you, Nathaniel.
American.
Okay.
Sorry about all the technical difficulties. American in 1913 would be a native of America, originally applied to the Aboriginal inhabitants, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America, and especially to the citizens of the United States. And then it has some other definitions. That's the one I'm primarily interested in right now.
Yeah, me too.
In 2019, the first definition is an American Indian of North America or South America. The second, now that's interesting, because when people say, we're talking about how accurate and helpful it is for describing what people are actually saying in political discussions, and how many people, when they're talking about Native Americans, say, oh, Americans. So it doesn't seem to line up with that. The second definition is a native or inhabitant of North America or South America. That's an okay definition. The third definition is a native or inhabitant of the U.S., a U.S. citizen. Now, that does nothing to describe to me what people mean when they say America is for Americans, or when they start arguing against illegal immigration. In fact, it sounds like it only describes one half of the political discussion.
Okay. Robert?
So basically what you're seeing in the 2019 dictionary, in those three definitions you just read off, is the order in which the word was used. Originally, it was used to describe the people they were about to kill off and then take the name for themselves as citizens of the U.S. So it is very accurate in describing how the word was used till it finally resulted in a native or inhabitant of the U.S., because we wound up killing off most of the original Americans.
Okay.
So that's how a language evolves. That's how a word evolves. It even evolved in the 1913 and said, this used to be describing the people that were here, but once we killed them all off, we took it for ourselves. So when you understand that words are evolving, even in the dictionary, that you're professing to use, well, it's the same definitions that are in this one. Everything that was said in that first thing is right there in those three definitions. It's just more concise.
Yeah, which is why the 1913 is more accurate, because it describes the evolution of language better than the 2019 does.
No, I'm smart enough. I'm smart enough to look at this and know this is how it worked.
No one thinks language doesn't evolve. We just think that 2019 dictionary doesn't even do a good job of describing that.
Of what? Describing what?
The evolution of language. 1913.
The dictionary is not about a history book. It's a dictionary. It defines words. It's not about. I can look at those three definitions and see the evolution of that word. That's what I understand. Yeah. 1, 2, 3 is how the word was used in the language and how it evolved. That's why they have different definitions there. That shows you the history of the word and the evolution very simply. If you understand how a dictionary works and you see that, then you don't question that it's telling you the evolution and the history of the word.
So thank you for singing the praise of the accuracy and helpfulness of the 1913 dictionary.
No, the 1913 dictionary? What does it tell us? The same thing, just in a more colorful way? Originally applied to the Aboriginal inhabitants.
Nathaniel's turn.
Oh, okay.
Nathaniel's turn.
Oh, he was asking me a question. Sorry, I was answering.
Okay.
What does the 2019 dictionary say? It says, it doesn't describe any of that. It says an American Indian of North America or South America, which you could say is the same thing that 1913 said, except it said that's how it used to be used. It's not used that way anymore. No one's, unless they're trying to make a really stupid point. In regular political discussion, no one says Americans and means Native Americans or Indians or Aboriginals or First Nations. They say all those words. They don't say Americans. So that's a totally inaccurate definition for modern parlance.
So when you skip down lower, does it not have number 1 of or pertaining to America as the American continent, semicolon or colon American Indians? 2 of or pertaining to the United States. So it even breaks it down further in the 1913, whereas it's very concise in the 2019, and I got the same gist out of very simple statements.
Well, no, because if you read the 2019 version, you would think that's what, and you had nothing else to go on, you would think that that's what people meant when they said Americans, and you would be wrong, and you would be very confused in a political discussion, because you'd think when people say we need more jobs for Americans, they were talking about people on reservations.
Okay, and which one? Yeah, people. Guess what? American Indians do need jobs. Just FYI, they're Americans.
Yeah, but that's not what people mean when they say that.
When they say American, they encompass everybody in America.
We need to have it specifically confuses people.
How does it specifically confuse you? Because it doesn't confuse me.
I think we got to stay away from rhetorical questions. Like, I get it, but if you're really asking something, let him respond.
Right. Okay. And I'm asking, how does it confuse you?
Well, I think it's clear. We should just move on from this one because it's just going to be back and forth. It's very clear what I'm saying.
So it doesn't confuse you?
It would confuse me if I didn't already know the meaning of the word, which, by the way, is more accurately represented by 1913, which is how I enter into this whole debate.
I will agree to disagree with you on that one because I don't need the colorful language to tell me the same thing.
Okay.
The first definition describes something that's totally untrue.
Okay, cool. All right, so that's the 2 words from each person, and I don't know. That's all the debate, like not all the questions, but all the points of contention. But my last thing is a question for both of you guys, and I guess Robert can start. So the question for both of you guys is, what benefit do you see to Nathaniel's side? And same thing for you, Nathaniel. And then I want to get into how this whole discussion started in the server, and then we can open the discussion.
So who are you asking?
I'm asking you first. What benefit do you see to Nathaniel's side?
If I were going to have a discussion about fundamentalist Christian values in politics, I could see using that. If I were going to have an argument about, if I were going to decide that our dictionary needed to be some historical document, okay, then I could see some benefit there. But it's not. So, there's very few benefits I see from it other than, it's a nice piece of... It's a nice artifact. It's a good place to look at documents from the day and then translate to today.
Okay. And same to you, Nathaniel. What benefit do you see of the 2019 Robert's?
Oh, it's very clear. Anybody who ever uses the word culture war should take from this that in order to actually be proactive about setting the culture and wanting it to be in a positive way, we have to either provide alternatives or take control. It's much more likely to provide alternatives of these tools of control that are used to manipulate people. You have to understand the value of the 2019 dictionary in leading people down that way. And it's usually people looking for a quick answer. And so it's the type of people, it's like the undecided people in an election. You know, you always figure those are the people who don't know anything. They're the ones making the decision. So
can I interject a question real quick, Nate?
Sure. That was a minute, but yeah, sure, definitely.
When you talk about this book to control us,
mm-hmm.
Do you own a dictionary?
I own a few.
Okay. Do you keep them on a shelf beside your other book meant to control the population?
No, actually.
Or do you keep that on a separate shelf from your Bible? See, you know the book I'm talking about.
Yeah, I keep my Bible right in front of me.
So
and I hardly ever break out the dictionary.
So why is the Bible okay as a tool for controlling the masses, but the dictionary, which you claim it is, and I don't agree with, is not?
Well, the Bible, because it has, first of all, the Bible, because it has so many copies and there's such stringent scholarship on it, more than there is for dictionaries, means it is more likely to stay consistent, and it has stayed consistent for a much larger period of time than the English dictionary. And secondly, because it controls people to make them good, and it actually teaches people how to be free so that they aren't controlled by things like dictionaries. That's why.
As long as they're controlled by the book they're reading.
The book that controls them to learning how to not be controlled by anything.
You know, you can wrap that in spin, but the bottom line is that means it's a tool to control people to learn how not to be controlled by the very tool that's controlling them.
What is the Bible control people to do?
Live a good life or you're going to burn in hell.
Okay. How does it define a good life?
Through fantasy. It tells great stories of how people persevered through paranormal and supernatural things. And
only if you go through and pick those out. That's not most.
Why are they in there?
Because it's a recording of events
that we trust, and you trust it, but I don't. That does so. Where's its validity? If you don't trust the dictionary and I don't trust the dictionary, and the dictionary is not valid because of that lack of trust, where is the Bible?
There's more stories of people not persevering and not sticking through what you described. There's more stories of evil people and even good people getting nothing but shit their whole life in the Bible than there are stories of people who persevered and got good things.
Shit, so, there's plenty of stories where people are just wiped out by the God who's telling them he's a loving and caring God. I love you so much, I'm going to wipe everybody out.
Yeah. So that doesn't sound like it's controlling people with those stories if they're so contradictory. If every single life story written down is completely different than the other one, doesn't sound like it's controlling them to live a certain way, at least through those stories.
It sounds like he pretty much had control. If any of that was, if that's supposed to be true, that sounds like ultimate control. I could just wipe everybody out and start all over again. That's pretty much control.
Sure, but it doesn't. Reading that doesn't control you. How does it control you?
Believing it does.
What does it control you to do?
If you believe that you need to live a life, a pious life, according to whatever you take from the Bible, you're letting that book be the foundation of how you live your life, and that is the controlling factor.
What's in the book? Because if the book contains the instruction to do what it is that what you see as correct and moral, then that gives you freedom. It doesn't tell you to do anything specific. Now, it does tell you to do specific things.
It tells you not to do some very specific things.
What are those things?
Oh, thou shalt not kill, yet how often are people killed in the name of God?
It says, thou shalt not murder.
Oh, my God. Okay, we want to get... So if you kill somebody in the name of your God because they don't believe, I qualify that as murder. That's not just.
There's a number of
That
people.
describes self-defense, the literal word, I believe. But I think I know that that it's thou shalt not murder. But I don't think it says. I don't know. Go on, Nathaniel. Yeah, but it is.
It's also
Yeah.
it's also a very, very small portion of that book, and it's not the whole point of the book. So it's not it says that, and then it gives you a bunch of stories of people who murdered, and it doesn't, and some of them lived happily. I mean, then one of the next big stories is about David, who he was famous for killing. Saul has killed his thousands, David has killed his tens of thousands. So clearly it doesn't even really do a good job of teaching you not to murder.
Well, hell, God even tested Abraham and wanted him to murder his son
Yeah,
to
so
test him. Wow, that's a nice God. He's not much of a manipulator, a controller, a puppet master, is he? That very much speaks to a controlling deity who is just playing with us like playthings.
Couple more thoughts on this, because it's been religious for about 5 minutes, which is fine. But if we're talking definitions, we got to wrap this part up.
The Bible isn't God, so reading it, and it's very now God might control you, but the Bible does not, and reading it does not control you, and that's very clear. Just because you read stories of people who live all kinds of different lives, it never really specifically makes you live one life or the other. It's very hard even to get. If you pick out the 10 Commandments out of the whole book, even that's hard to do because there's 100 laws after that. So it's not controlling.
Yeah,
all it does really is provide you information.
When you
God might be controlling, but the Bible isn't.
When you write a book and sell it as the Word of God, you're kind of laying it at His feet, and He's the one in charge.
I didn't buy it from anybody. It was given to me free. Anybody can pick it up free.
I'm talking about the 8,000 guys that wrote that shit a few thousand years ago. But carry on.
I mean, you guys are not going to convince yourselves of this tonight, so we're just going to move on from this round, which is kind of the last round. But if you want to, I don't know, if you want to finish the thought.
Go.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I mean, that's kind of the last round. So the debate is kind of over, and we're going to wait till John gets back.
I want to say one thing.
Sure, 1 minute.
I really dislike debate formats because when I talk to somebody like Robert, I actually want to persuade him, and I understand it's very difficult to do. It probably won't ever happen. I like to think that if he thinks he's right, he wants to persuade me. That's what a good person would do. In a debate format, you have absolutely no chance of persuading your opponent. All you're doing is fighting with your opponent so that the person who's listening might be persuaded. And oftentimes they end up more confused than ever. And whatever side they start out on is the one they end up on. So I don't like debate.
Actually, the whole point to debate is just that, is to get the people who are hearing the debate to hear a discussion, take part in the discussion, or carry the discussion past the debate so that we're having a discussion and hopefully coming to a solution. That's the point to a formatted debate.
So
what? Well, it never comes.
I'm not here to be swaying your opinion. I'm not here to be swayed by yours.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd rather it was that way. We'd be a lot friendlier.
Oh,
different goals aside. I mean, so let me ask you something then, Nathaniel, and then so what would you call the act of trying to persuade someone else? Like, if it's not a debate, what would you call that act? If we're talking definitions.
What would be the word for it?
Convincing, a persuasion, conversation.
It would just be a conversation or an argument, and it generally 95% of it is just asking questions in order to get a full understanding of the other person's current place.
Okay.
And most of the time you walk away without even being able to lead them anywhere else.
Okay, so I gotta turn my my camera off for a second. So John, why don't you take over? And the last topic. I mean, we're done with the debate now, and the chat is starting to ask, like who won and whatnot. And so if you want to take questions from,
better.
Yeah, but that's for other people to decide. And so questions from the chat, and maybe we want to talk about how this whole thing came about.
Yeah, I figured you were going to go into that.
Yeah, so I'm going to turn my stuff off, John.
Yeah, you're good.
Run stuff. Yeah, okay.
I got you. All right. So yeah, we got if anyone wants to ask questions in the chat, now it's time to do that. And Robert, if you want to kind of tell us how this whole debate came about, that would be good.
This whole debate started a conversation about Andrew Yang,
Yeah. He said he
and
was
and
born.
and Nate kind of made some very judgmental comments about Andrew Yang, and it started this whole
But
discussion.
yeah, let's do keep it out of any kind of personal attacks. So I'm just as a preface,
What
I
did
know
I?
it was a highly contentious. No, no, no. I'm not
No,
saying you've done it now. I'm saying
no. I'm just
let's
pointing
keep
out.
that out.
I mean, anybody can read the conversation and see.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and from there, it sparked a debate slash argument that diverged multiple ways throughout the conversation. Actually, this debate topic wasn't what I was expecting whenever I went ahead and told Nate to put the challenge out there. I thought we were going to be discussing something much more specific. I thought we were going to be discussing, we would probably take on ethnicity and this idea that if you are, if you're of a different ethnicity, you're not, ethnically American, even if you were born in this country, which is where this is the point of contention that really got all this ball rolling. But yeah, and then we got into back and forth over different words and how they're defined, et cetera, et cetera. But
And I copy pasted a straw poll link so we can find out who won based on the chat and what they say. So click on that link. I'll post it as it disappears from the chat so we can get as many votes as we can. And yeah. So continue, please, Robert.
no, and that's kind of nutshelling the whole thing. I mean, it was it's one of these things. I mean, we all how I am, and Nate has seen how I am. If you're gonna make blanket statements that you are presenting as fact, well, I want you to back them up. If you want to profess an opinion, that's fine. But whenever enough things were stated that I needed facts on, that's when I was like, okay, fine, let's take this to debate. Put the topic out there, what you want to debate on, and we'll go to town on it. And that's basically what it encompassed. It was like almost, what was it? Almost a day and a half, 2 days worth of chat in there, going back and forth on the various topics in there.
Yeah.
Actually, surprisingly enough, the definition thing, the whole 1913 dictionary was a very small part of the conversation.
Very small. I didn't feel qualified to debate on the ethnicity and nationality thing. It's a very new opinion of mine that I've come to very recently. And debate really is not the place to go for, to decide like a new opinion. It's for one that you've really, and by the way, the definition debate is very new for me and not one it's one I've come to recently. So I don't feel very firm in it. But I'm not convinced by this conversation. But that's the thing is, debate is it's a battle. It's not me and him. I'm probably not going to develop as far as opinions on the topic.
The straw poll is 50-50 right now.
How many people?
Well, there's only 4 votes. Someone asked me a question.
There's a ton of questions in the chat.
Is there? Yep. I just got into the chat.
50. I mean, over the course of the whole thing, man.
Yeah.
Well,
I wanted to see if it was okay. If what, I don't want to like just take over. So like, what questions should I answer? Should I answer any of them?
John, want to decide on that?
Well, I like Killian's.
Well, yeah. I mean, I like that question, but I'm not sure if it fits the debate format. But I mean, we've already kind of digressed. We've also kind of digressed anyway into that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I see no problem with it. If you consent,
it's just my opinion.
Answer it.
To very simple answer, and then
we'll hang on because people listening later on probably won't see the question. So let's put the question on the air, and then you can answer it from there. So he says, for Nate, in your opinion, how does Christianity not try to assimilate others? You mentioned that they do not try to force others to their religion when there has been so much history of the opposite.
So I don't want to get into this, but be very careful when you say there has been so much history of the opposite, because you really have to look at all belief systems and how they all compare And, is Christianity the number one for forcing, by violence, its opinion on others? I don't know, but you can't just say that. It's, you really should look into it. But here's very simple.
There's history that supports it.
All right, hang on, Robert, because let him answer. The question was for him, so let him answer.
The simple answer is the one I gave today, which is if you assimilate people into believing in freedom, then they will then decide for themselves. And Christianity, and this is the thing that's not communicated very well, Christianity is a religion of freedom. It has the least requirements of all religions, has the least doctrines of all religions. A lot of churches have very specific doctrines, but if you're going off the Bible and if you're going off of Christ's teachings, it has almost no requirements. It has like two. It basically, and then when they build on it in the early church, they only gave a few. It was don't murder, okay, don't sleep with someone you're not married to, and don't steal. If you could do that, we can take everything else slowly, because it was a bunch of Jews that had a lot of rules, accepting a bunch of Gentiles that there was no way they were going to accept that rule. So there were very few rules in Christianity at all, and it's one of the only religions like that. Even Buddhism has a specific way to achieve enlightenment. You have to go through steps, depending on which sect of Buddhism. So
Depending on which branch of Christianity you're following, you have a lot of fucking rules. I mean, the Catholic religion is chock full of rules. Hell, you can't even get through a church service without going through a fucking aerobics workout in a very precise way. Sit, stand, kneel.
Well, that's Catholic, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The Catholic
religion.
That's Christians, right? That's part of Christianity.
A lot of Christians actually won't admit that Catholics are Christian. I'm not saying that Nate is of that opinion. I'm just saying that there's a lot of Christians who don't consider Catholics to be Christian.
And isn't that a fundamental problem with Christianity when they can't all just get along and be Christians together? I mean, why do we have so many subsets of Christianity? This one boggles me. But from a historical standpoint, you can't argue facts that there was a Spanish Inquisition, that there were Christians out there on crusades to try and bring people into the fold of Christianity. Whether it was Catholic or not, it was Christianity. And just like any other religion that has used violence to increase their numbers or spread their word, Christianity has had their share. It doesn't matter if they were number one or not. They did it.
So the reason why there's so many different denominations is because you're free when you accept Christ. So every single Christian can have their own opinion, which is why it breaks down like that. Catholics, I'm not going to say Catholics aren't Christian. I think some of them are, some of them aren't. And by the way, I think the same way about just about anybody in any kind of church. But that without arguing about whether or not it's true, that is the way I could say that it doesn't assimilate people. Because assimilating people to freedom essentially means assimilating people out of their current rules. Because most people have rules in their lives that are more stringent on them, that control them, before they come to Christianity. And then the goal of Christianity was, life and life more abundantly was. Now you could argue about whether or not it does that. That's fine. But that's how I can say it, is from reading Christ's teachings, it takes rules off of people. That's why it doesn't assimilate people. That's why.
So can I believe in God and follow a godly lifestyle without a Bible?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'm probably one of the few people who will say that, but yeah.
Okay, so
definitely.
Ultimately, Christianity, I mean, one thing that I've found very prevalent through meeting various denominations of Christian is Christians amongst themselves sit around and judge everybody that don't believe like they do. They judge them as wrong. Okay, so we're the little group that's not going to burn in hell. So that being said, your religion, like you asked me off mic earlier about, do I profess to know more about your religion than you do? And I said that's a rhetorical question because all religion is subjective. How do you determine who follows your diatribe enough not to be cast out as
There's a very
Christian?
simple answer to that, and it actually answers an earlier thing that was brought up about different sects and whatnot. I forget the exact wording, but you have to look at how each religion treats its sacred texts. Okay? Besides Christianity, there is no other religion except for Islam that holds its sacred text to be as definitive. Islam also holds the Quran to be as definitive as Christians hold the Bible. Mm-hmm. Now, the difference between the Quran and the Bible is the Quran gives a very specific, complicated set of rules for living. The Bible gives a very specific, complicated sets of rules for living, and then disbands those sets of rules. So that is how, the way specifically that question, because I don't want to lose track of it. The way you can determine is by the three rules that I mentioned earlier, plus the additional rule of professing and not denying who Christ is, which is written. And the way you know that for sure is written in the Bible. So, and we hold it to be that. That's the only way to know if someone's a Christian. So that's why you can't say Catholics aren't Christian. You could say there are things they're doing that aren't preaching the Bible. But I would never say they aren't truly Christian. I would say there are probably some of them that aren't truly Christian. But that's how you know. You know because it's written clear as day in the book.
But what if you don't follow the book and still choose to believe in God?
Then in order to define whether or not you were a Christian, I would look at the book and see if you are. And you might not follow the book and still be a Christian if you did those four things. And not murder, steal, and profess Christ and never deny him.
And do you not see the irony in saying that the Bible gives you very clear set of rules to follow, and then continues and then disbands those rules, very much negating its purpose in the first place?
No, because its purpose is to set people free. That's my whole point.
So I'm going to give you rules, and I want you to be free enough to not follow those rules.
Those rules are the written down version of what people think they're supposed to do anyways.
Oh, those weren't God. Those weren't from God, like it says in the Bible.
No, they are. They are from God. God wrote those on our hearts. So when someone reads the list of rules, then it's what they would have followed. And then it says, I know you can't do that, so that's why I provided for you. And then it says you only have to do those four things. And those four things are freeing. Not murdering, not stealing, and not sleeping with strangers. Professing Christ and never denying him is freeing. It's certainly more freeing than any other religion.
Okay, so I'm sorry for being dense here, but it sounds like to me you're telling me that the whole story of Moses and the tablets and the Ten Commandments, that didn't happen. That these were written on our hearts. That incident wasn't true. Were those written on stone tablets?
Yes.
Okay, so there were 10 commandments, but the Bible goes on to disband those and say, you're free to not follow any of the rules I've laid out for you.
Basically, yeah.
But you're going to burn in hell for all of eternity if you do.
Well, it provides a way for you to not do that. No, this is what it actually does, Robert. It's very specific. It lays out rules that no one can follow perfectly, and then says, if you don't perfectly follow these, you will burn in hell. And then what that makes you realize is there's no way to do it, which makes you call upon God, which is where you get the Christ.
And do you think the dictionary's confusing? But you're saying the dictionary's confusing, and that's some of the most confusing stuff I've ever heard. I mean, that's confusing to me.
Job of communicating it. But
no, it just sounds like a puppet master playing with people because he's got nothing better to do.
It's simple enough for the majority of. I mean, Christianity, I think, is the biggest religion in the world.
I mean, I understand the justifications of the fairy tales, but that doesn't make the fairy tales true. And that's the problem with people who don't buy into this, is you cannot rule a country of individuals that you tell are free to believe whatever they want to believe, and then tell them we're going to legislate based off a religion you don't follow.
So I want to note real quick. I want to note real quick that the voting going on. It's 4 votes to Robert and 4 votes to Nate so far.
Did we count Killian?
Robert won.
We're counting Killian's because
That
he's on the same IP
was just
address, so
right.
he can't vote on it.
He voted for me in the chat.
He did, yeah.
Too.
So we're counting him as
is that
towards
counted
Robert.
in there? Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah, that's counting because otherwise it's
Okay.
57-43.
Robert debated much better than I did. I was right, and I did a poor job of representing the correct position.
Okay, I mean we put it up to the people, to vote, and they agree. It's 50-50.
Huh.
Half of them agree with you, and half of them agree with Robert. So I mean, I think that's. Oh, go ahead.
Maybe we should, you should put this straw poll in the show description. I mean, people might just vote
After
and not
watching
listen
it
to
later?
but
Yeah.
yeah, you put in the show
All
description.
right, yeah, we can do that.
I don't understand. I don't understand why people think I'm being arrogant or making a joke when I say I'm right. Like, I am right.
Aren't
Otherwise,
you both saying you're right?
Robert-
That's why you're debating.
Yeah, that's the whole point of the debate
You're
is
both
that you're
saying
both
you're
saying you're right.
Right.
Yeah,
Who cares if people think you're arrogant, man? Who
Yeah.
cares? So you just think
yeah,
you're
they
right.
can cry you a river.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm chock full of motherfucking arrogance.
Yeah.
yeah.
you know,
That's why we do
I was
YouTube.
arrogant when I laid down this challenge.
Yeah. For the people that
Yeah.
think you're arrogant, they can start their own debate.
Right?
Yeah,
Like
If- if-
it's fine.
Arrogancy is a key tool to use in a debate.
I mean, now that we're done debating, I mean, I'm kind of on the same, the same thing as Nathaniel, where it's like, if you think you're right, like what you were saying to Robert, like if he's, people that think they're right, they want the other person to be on their side, and that's how you do a discussion. And I don't see anything wrong if it's arrogance. Fuck it, like it's
Yeah.
fine.
I mean,
I
that's
like what-
you
I like
wouldn't
what,
be a debate if you didn't think you were right.
Yeah, it's fine.
I like what Tinchy says in the chat there. Arrogance is American. Goddamn right.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
Now
yeah.
understand that just because you say you're right, it's much like the Bible. That doesn't mean it's true.
Well, it's just
but-
like anything, really.
I mean, because I was the one that's I'm
it's
right.
true because it's true. It's not true because I follow it.
Oh,
I've been absolutely right about things that, or I thought I've been absolutely right about things I've been completely wrong on before.
You weren't saying you weren't saying you were right in the debate. You were talking about your political leanings.
No, I was saying.
I'm just fucking with you. I had to throw that
Well, my
out.
political leanings too. I mean, one thing you have to understand is like, and you can probably say the same thing in the opposite direction, but I used to think I used to have all the opinions that you have, and then I changed through painful experience to have the opinions I have now. So,
It was.
but like I said, you could probably say the same thing about yourself in the other direction. But that's where I come. I'm not somebody who was raised in a nice Christian home. I'm somebody who was raised to be very liberal, to believe in all these things, and I believed in all of them, and I tested them out, found them to be incorrect. And that's why I don't want to believe anything I believe. It's very upsetting. I've been ostracized from many groups. My family won't talk to me because my opinions on transgenderism specifically. It sucks, but it's true, and so that's why I do it. And it's even true if I don't argue it well. So, anyways.
All right. Uh-oh. All right, I gotta get out of here, guys. If you want to get on your channel, so I'm about to bounce. That was fun.
Hey,
we can end it here. It's
Stephen Ignoramus, thank you for coming in and moderating this debate. You're a hell of a man. If you look down below in the description, you will see multiple links to Mr. Ignoramus's channels. Please check him out. Stephen, go ahead and tell us when are you out there on the intertubes?
Well, I try to do 5 to 8 streams a week, so I'm out there a lot. I do a stream every weekday, midday, called the Daily Ignoramus. I try to get in 2 interviews per week. That's called Call Me Ignorant. 2 out of the 3 of y'all have been on my show, and I want to get Nathaniel on the show as well.
Hey, can you just send me a message on Discord or something?
Sure.
I'll just send you my number so you can get a hold of me.
Oh, it got real.
Kinky.
Wow.
So yeah.
Do you two need
There's
a
bunch of
room?
people in the chat.
Get a room, you guys.
So you can find that Call Me Ignorant on Spotify and Apple as a podcast, as well as YouTube. I'm on Twitter at Ignoramus Steve, and I don't know.
All right, so
Give me
real
a
quick, big
shout.
round of applause.
Thanks
Thank
for
you, Stephen
sticking in there.
Ignoramus.
Yeah,
Awesome job
and-
as a moderator.
And Steven's a good guy. His streams are awesome. I'm in there all the time. I'm actually the only mod in his YouTube stream.
Yeah.
So yeah,
He
definitely
does.
check it out. He's awesome.
He does all
I
right for
keep
a
having
trap.
my moderator.
Just all right for a white boy. Yeah.
I've been moderator in 5 streams, and it's been taken away from me in all 5.
All right, and while we're doing it, right above me, Nate. Thank you so much for coming in. You can find Nate at his link below as well. He's got himself some YouTube going on. Glad you showed up for the debate, Nate. It was rousing and exciting to see you be so wrong for so long. So, Nate, if you want to plug your show real quick and let people know when they can find you, then we can wrap this up and get out of here.
And I'll keep being wrong for even longer until you come on. Okay, so yeah, I do a Bible study every day. If that's not your thing, I cuss a lot in the Bible study. I think it livens things up, and I also have got a couple of books that I've written, and I've got some other projects up there. One thing I'm working on is reading through all the books, and I've got some other topics on there on different things like getting a better job. I've got a lot on abortion in there, pornography. And it's just me talking, and other people talking to me and stuff like that. So just click around, see what kind of thing you like. I write fiction books, and it's a lot of fun, especially if you would like a fiction book that doesn't teach you that all white men and fathers are evil and Christians are generally trying to manipulate the world and destroy half of it. Mine usually aren't like that. Although people do die. There's a lot of death, sex, and drugs. So
nice. Sounds like my Saturday nights.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
All right, folks.
Have that kind of shit.
Hey, let's give it up for Nate. Thank you, Nate, for showing up tonight.
Yeah.
And folks out there in the audience, you guys are awesome. We've had a lot of discussion going on in the chat. Folks in Nate's corner, folks in my corner, folks in no corner at all, standing in a round room looking for a corner. And I want to say we appreciate it. If you liked what you saw tonight, hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Keep coming back to see us. Look in the description for those of you who are watching this after the fact. John's going to put the straw poll in there. So if you lean one way or the other as to who won this debate, so be it. I don't care who won. I just got to run my mouth for a while, so I'm happy about that. John, they can find us somewhere.
Yeah, you can find us a couple of places. You can find us on Twitter at the GenGapP, and you can find us in the Discord link. It's down below. We have a nice Discord server, which is where this debate spawned from. So if you want to see some spicy conversation, head over there and be part of it.
Yep, we love all the input we get from you folks on Discord. Love talking to you guys. Glad you listened to our conversations. We're going to be coming back at you on Monday night, 9 o'clock, for a little bit of shooting the shit. And after that, catch these other two guys all through the week. Look for them on YouTube. Give them your support. Hit the likes and subscribes. Folks, we are out of here. Thank you so much for everything. Have a good night.
Yeah, see you guys.